The New Jersey Devils are set to take on the Montreal Canadiens for their second preseason matchup of the season. Joseph Stanislaw, aka Jersey Joe, accompanied me on today's episode to give me his thoughts on preseason and some players to keep an eye out for. There's a lot to break down with Jersey Joe. As always, buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils writer of Pucks, Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. In a few days, less than a week, the New Jersey Devils will travel across the pond to Prague to take on Lindy Ruff and the Buffalo Sabres. While they're making their way out of the States, I want to welcome back my colleague over at Pucks and Pitchforks from his trip in Europe, Joseph Stanislaw, a.k.a. Jersey Joe. Now, Jersey Joe, I didn't think I would have you back on this show until October, but you actually messaged me a few days ago saying, hey, let's do a follow-up episode. And lo and behold, here you are once again. But before we talk all things Devils, how was your trip to Europe? What did you see?
So I was in a town called Multala, Italy. It's in the region of Puglia. Anyone knows it's home to a lot of really good olive oil, a lot of really good wine. If you understand history, you'll like the Trulli buildings in Alberobello. Beautiful town. Very steady pace. It's not crazy, but beaches are nice. Towns are great. It's more old, ancient homes. Anyways, it's kind of like one of those great places where in the off season, hockey players, want to get away from the States or Canada for a while. It's a great place to dial back.
Absolutely. And are you getting adjusted being back in the States? Because I know time zone shifts can kick someone's butt. I'm no exception to it. I'm trying to get accustomed to Eastern time again after spending the past 2 years out west.
It's a little different, but I understand what the players are going to go through because for me, my flight back, usually I fly directly to Newark International from a destination, but this time it was a little messed up from Bari to Rome and Rome to DC and DC to Newark, which I did not want to do. I want to just go straight to Newark. But all that said and done, I did make my way to a couple of United clubs and rested up my brain a little bit, but it took me a little over 2 days to get my brain back to East Coast time.
Yeah. Yep. I've been to Europe a few times, Nice, France, Paris, France, England to see my aunt. Always a good time. And I actually told Anna Baining, I told Sam Kassan this. I was planning on maybe traveling with the Devils to go to Prague to cover the Devils and Sabres, but I'm just like, no, that's not realistic. I'm going to drain myself before the season even starts because I do plan on doing a bit of traveling this upcoming season, similar to what I did last year. But anyway, enough talking about vacation plans. Jersey Joe, hockey is back. The Devils took on the New York Islanders. Unfortunately, they came out losing it by a score of 4-2. But here's the thing. They don't have to worry about the undefeated preseason curse. They are free from that, and I'm not going to complain about it. I'm perfectly content with it. There was some good, there was some bad, but it's preseason. Take it with a grain of salt. It's just people to go through the motions. Give me your thoughts on the first preseason game against the Islanders.
The first period started out great. I mean, Markstrom looked as advertised. Yeah, he did give up 2 goals, but you know what? Everyone is basically spraying themselves with WD-40. Not literally, I mean figuratively, because, you want to get rid of the rust from the offseason. So basically some players, on defense, making some miscues on reads and stuff like that. You're basically recalibrating your brain through all the simulations on the ice, and you're all going at a fast pace, but some of these guys are already 55% of the way there. Some guys are 75% of the way there because some guys probably played in maybe the IIHF games, but everyone else is a little bit off.
Well, according to Devil's Army blog, here's what Markstrom put up in his debut. He stopped 17 of 19 shots, and he had a minus 0.28 goals above expected. Basically, he looked decent, and that's what I said in the previous episode. He looked like he was in midseason form, and James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now acknowledged it on his respective social media feed. I think Jacob Markstrom is going to be solid for the Devils this upcoming season. But I'm looking forward to Jake Allen returning to Montreal to take on the Canadiens. And I've said on this show before, but I think people from the Devils discourse, we should be sending thank you notes to the Canadiens for retaining half of Jake Allen's contract. Basically, you said you're willing to take on half of his contract just to get rid of him, but he was quite good in the second half for New Jersey.
Right, and I'm going to bring up a little Moneyball reference, and it's like when they had Brad Pitt talk to the guy playing David Justice, said, the Yankees are paying half of your contract. Basically, they're paying half your contract for you to play for us, and half of that contract is for us to have you beat your employer, your old employer. Now, Jake Allen being paid half that contract. Now, that's like saying go out there, beat Montreal at their own game. So, and now you have another former Canadian, Jonathan Kovacevic. Basically, the Devils got a really good deal on him. So he looked pretty good in the first period. Second period, he kind of changed the minutes on each of the defense pairing just to get to see what a couple of the newer guys like Brendan Dillon. And I'm telling you, they brought the boom.
They absolutely did, the meat line. But Bastian looked a little slower compared to Cotter and compared to Lazar. But I'm not going to hold it against him just because Bastian is recovering from injury.
From the Rempe hit.
Yeah, from the Rempe hit that sidelined him for pretty much the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So I'm not really going to hold that against Bastian. He's taking his time, and I'm sure he's going to be just fine because that meat line looked really good. But I think you prefer to call him the Sasquatch line because what does Sasquatch see?
He's the third Sasquatch on that line. Basically, you can't have just one Sasquatch on a line. You got to have all three. You got to have them all do their job. Basically, one creates chaos, one goes for the puck, one goes after the puck on the next flank just to make sure no one gets away with it, and you have a strong forecheck line and you soften the other team's defenses. And when you wear them down, you create more looser opportunities, otherwise where you wouldn't have had it if you didn't have the puck in your own zone, in your own offensive zone. Matter of fact, it's kind of like the more modern version of dumb chase, except more rough and tumble. Now, it could be, who knows, maybe better than the crash line.
Don't worry, there's still more in store. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds, and please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, let's get back to our discussion with Jersey Joe of Pucks and Pitchforks. Take it away once again. Yeah, that crash line that had Miles Wood basically leading the way alongside Michael McLeod. That was an interesting line. I will say that. But out with the old, in with the new. And like I said, when this episode goes live, the Devils are set to take on the Montreal Canadiens in Quebec. Now, do you see any notable players that you want to highlight, courtesy of Amanda Stein, who was at the Devils practice? She put out what the Devils were rolling with, and basically you're going to see players that did not play in the previous game against the Islanders. And it's going to be interesting for New Jersey because, like I've been saying a lot on this show, the team will fly out to Prague on September 29th, which doesn't give them ample time to really see like who's going to make the team, who's going to travel with the team, who's going to come on as an extra, whatever the case might be. We've seen some notable players like Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Dougie Hamilton leave their mark. But in this game, we're most likely going to see Jack Hughes, Timo Meier, Dawson Mercer, and Kevin LeBanc might be an interesting candidate. But is there someone that sticks out to you for this matchup tonight?
So you look at Will McKinnon, the left-handed defenseman. He was very active in the rookie tournament and also playing in the first. I don't think he played in the first game, but he definitely played with a lot of pace of play, uses feet, very active, really good passer. Not afraid to shoot the puck on net. I mean, you also have to factor in another guy I mentioned in the past, in Topias Vieland, the Finnish defenseman. Usually just a kiss player, keep it simple, stupid. Poke, check, pucks away, stay in position more. But the Devils did mention that he's been working on the physicality. I want to see that, where he can add that Sasquatch zest if he can. But I want to see more out of him. And then I have more expectations for Daniel Misiul. It's I believe his second or third season in North America since coming over from the KHL. And he's a Belarusian player, and he's someone who has experience from the KHL, been playing in the AHL for the past couple of years. He's had a cup of coffee already with the Devils, but I expect him to be one of those guys getting called up on a moment's notice because he can actually fill in physically, defensively, and carrying the puck up ice for the Devils when they really need another body that can move the puck really well.
I think another player that I want to highlight, and this is someone who's really fallen under the radar, and that is Curtis McDermott, because we were actually talking about this in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat, like what's going to happen with Curtis McDermott, because he signed a 3-year extension with the Devils. But here's my hot take, if you would. I said, if the Devils are good, he's not going to play in most of the games. In fact, I'd say he'd be lucky to suit up in 40 games. He's going to bring physicality, don't get me wrong, but he's not really efficient. And when you got guys like Dylan, Cotter, and Nason, do you really need McDermott out there, or do you just need him more for his locker room presence?
You need him for the locker room presence. You need him for the experience. I mean, guys like him have served a long time in the NHL, and he's seen a thing or two about winning a Stanley Cup. Paul Cotter himself has won a Stanley Cup, and he plays physical too. But he's the more dynamic of the physical players that we have mentioned. Now, with that being said, you look at Hockey Reference. I mentioned one of my past articles. There's more guys with at least 5 to 14 years experience in the NHL on this Devils roster, which makes them more experienced. There's more guys to share scouting reports on other teams' players or guys similar to those guys and how to approach things. Now, with that being mentioned, there should be less friction with this team. But Sheldon Keefe, with me, having watched what he did with one of the practices, actually stopping to say, look, guys, you need to communicate with each other. And when you're communicating more frequently on the ice, you're letting your other team know the cues, where to be or get back, because they might be having the opponents try and beat you with a deep, quick pass. You just don't know sometimes. So you got to really think about those smaller intangibles.
And here's someone else I want to highlight, and that is Samuel LaBerge, because here's a guy who comes from a blue-collar background, and he actually stopped playing hockey for a minute because his father was unfortunately diagnosed with bone cancer, and he departed from a professional league in Quebec to be home with his father. And he was basically working his way back into professional hockey. And he signed a standard player contract with the Adirondack Thunder, the ECHL affiliate with the Devils. And now he has worked his way to an NHL roster. And we actually saw him suit up in a few games for the Devils last year. And I always say for sports, we love a good underdog story. And I think Samuel LaBerge epitomizes that, just because here's a guy from a blue collar background, took a small break from hockey to be with his father, to be with his family, and now he's back in the NHL. He's set to play in this game against the Canadiens, according to the line combos put out by Amanda Stein. Once again, we'll see what happens. But do you have any expectations for LaBerge?
For LaBerge, I expect him to be on the fourth line, especially being on the wing, maybe part-time at center. But I expect him to be that strong board presence, physical guy, shutdown guy. But I don't expect him to score a lot, but I expect him to be more like just prevent things before they happen and be more responsible in his own end. And also there's another guy that's a similar story, but I wouldn't necessarily call him blue collar, but his name is Jack Malone. From Spring Lake, New Jersey, which is a few towns south of me. And he actually went to one of the big hockey colleges. And he signed in the offseason with the Utica Comets. And he actually has impressed me as a forward. And I like the way he's been shooting the puck, been playing a little physical. He's very motivated to play for his hometown Devils. I mean, a guy like him who's motivated to play at forward for a team that is deep already in the farm system, just one phone call away from being almost back home, speaks high levels. And for me, he's very self-motivated, and the way he can be more physical on the offensive zone, I need to see more of him defensive-wise, but once I get to see him tomorrow or the next couple of games, I can get to see more what he's all about.
And let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the Prospects Challenge, which is sort of your bread and butter. And I wanted to save this discussion for you, because for the Prospects Challenge, it allows some players to, similar to development camp, get their feet wet in an NHL lifestyle. And this time they're going up against other young talent from the East Coast, and it's held in Buffalo. Were there any standouts in your opinion? Because people were high on Chase Stillman, but unfortunately, Chase Stillman didn't really look all that good in his first preseason matchup. Or people loved Parent. Could he? I think you've
Xavier Perron. I mean, the Quebecer himself. I mean, he's very fleet of foot. I mean, really good passer, really good shooter. He thinks very fast paced, which is really important when you look for a player, especially he's been in the system for almost 2 years. So it's really important to have not just, guys from your first couple rounds. It's good to have your late rounders and your undraftees to show you something that what they're made of. Now, speaking of later round guys, Max Graham was another standout in scoring, not necessarily goals, but assists. And he's one of those guys, I wondered why they picked him, but they like the way he thinks, at a higher pace and a higher level. Yes, guys in the later rounds tend to be a little bit older. Sometimes it's like, people coming out of school where people develop a little bit later on in their learning life. And in this case, it's hockey, where not everyone, develops at the same pace as, a top prospect, but they can bloom into something wonderful. And then another guy, Matthias Malowski. Yes, I mentioned him a few episodes back with you. He's been a really good shooter, sniper. He's got a little bit of a power forward game, but he can also be a playmaker when it really does happen. And I think he was in the QMJHL, and he really lit it up. I mean, I think he is Czech, so he has been used to North America the past couple of years. So I see him as a guy who can definitely fill in a couple of years. I mean, the Devils right now are pretty deep at forward, and they're not going to have to need a guy like Milovsky right away because they got so much depth up front already.
Yeah, now let's transition to some highly touted prospects. Like, we're not talking about guys who fall under the radar. We're talking about guys who can make the opening night roster if all goes well. One of those players, and honestly, I think it's best that he remains in the AHL to begin the year, is Seamus Casey. Once again, looking at the line combos from practice, Casey was on the defensive pairing with Tobias Wieland, and Seamus Casey was really good at the University of Michigan, and I think his future is very bright. I think it's a little bit of a question mark how the Devils are going to use him moving forward. I think you should maybe entertain the fact of giving him some reps in terms of being a forward. We'll see what happens, but Seamus Casey might make his unofficial Devils debut. How excited are you for Seamus?
Me, I'm very excited for him. I mean, at defense, it's going to be really hard for him to crack the NHL that way because remember, we already got Pesce, Dillon, Hamilton. When Luke Hughes comes back and Sentry Hataka's already there and a couple other guys, I can't even roll off my tongue right away. It's going to be hard, extremely hard. Even if someone has an injury or something, good luck. I mean, you're going to have to make him a winger or a center, but me knowing him as a really good dynamic playmaker with the puck and really good skater, he should definitely be a forward at this point if he's going to stay with the Devils within the next couple seasons. I mean, you already signed him to an ELC, so you give him, 2-3 years? So, I mean, he is very cost controlled, and I would like to see him, playing a game where the Devils beat the living daylights out of, let's say, I don't know, maybe the Montreal Canadiens or the San Jose Sharks, and the Devils are up 7 goals and they're already in a playoff spot. Put in Seamus Casey playing center or wing. Meanwhile, you might want to rest a defenseman or two, and you call up another defenseman from Utica at this point to rest a couple of veteran bodies. I'm not going to rush Seamus Casey just because, he's a highly touted player. You want to bring in those guys when they got enough reps on the road, on the ice.
Yeah, and I think for Casey, like I said, his future is bright. And I saw that development camp up close and personal. He's joining in on the rush. My only issue is that compared to some of the other defensemen that the Devils have, not only is it a logjam because players like Brett Pesce, Dougie Hamilton, Brendan Dillon, Jonas Siegenthaler, they're signed long-term, but also factor in Shimo Nemitz, Luke Hughes. They're projected to get big contracts themselves, which is a talking point we're going to have to discuss at some point because the Devils don't have much financial room to work with after re-signing Dawson Mercer.
Right.
And they're going to have to get somewhat creative, and Fitzy is going to have his hands full. He might have to do what he did with John Marino, which is you're going to have to part ways with a big name asset to try to clear up some of that finance. People are pointing at Andre Palat. Maybe it could be Jonas Siegenthaler. We don't really know.
I think at this point, Siegenthaler might be an afterthought, and I would not be opposed to moving him. You just don't know which card you're going to be dealt with him. But I wouldn't be surprised if he is the next odd man out next to Palat. But Palat, when it comes to the playoffs, I'd rather have Palat because he does perform in the playoffs. So he's playoff Palat for a reason.
Yeah, we did see that. We did see that a couple seasons ago during the 2022-2023 campaign
with a certain player we should not be talking about anymore. But on a dynamic takeover line on that drive that resulted into a double shutout over the Rangers in Game 7 at the Prudential Center.
Right, because it wasn't Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, or Jesper Bratt leading the way. It was rookie Akira Schmid. It was Andre Palat. It was Eric Haula. It was that player that you mentioned, McLeod. And we're not going to get into detail about
that. That ship has sailed.
Yeah, that ship has sailed. But you get it. It was like the tale of the underdogs for New Jersey coming up big in Game 7 against the Rangers. In fact, just coming up big, period, in that series, because that was going the way of the Rangers. The Devils were on death's door. They were down 2-0 in the
first
series.
2 games.
Yeah, first 2 games, and they had home ice advantage too.
The Rangers did, and they lost it when Dougie Hamilton scored in overtime. Matter of fact, I want to bring up Dougie Hamilton now, because now that he is back.
Well, Dougie is not slated to play in this game, but Dougie did impress against the Islanders. But go ahead.
But now having him back, getting ready for the next couple preseason games, getting revved up for Czechia, it's really good to have him back, because a man of his swagger, his caliber, his jersey-tude, may I explain jersey-tude a little bit? It's an attitude you have for playing for New Jersey, living in New Jersey, being part of New Jersey. And you don't have to live here to necessarily know, but if you know a lot of people living in New Jersey, you know how much we love and how much we hate certain things, but he appreciates the culture and the vibe in New Jersey. So he's a marquee player who understands when the going gets tough. He delivers on the offensive, and I wouldn't be surprised when the Devils do get to the playoffs this year. He's that X factor that gets us through round 1 and round 2.
Let me tell you guys about Indeed. I've actually used Indeed before to book myself some play-by-play gigs. I still get notifications in my email to this very day. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And now, before we get back to Jersey Joe, let me tell you guys about PrizePicks. I actually love using the PrizePicks app, and I love looking at the over and under and placing my predictions. What is PrizePick? Well, PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the action in sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Want to play PrizePicks with some notable people? You can now find community plays under the promos tab and the app to view entries with some of the biggest names in PrizePicks communities each week. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, take it away. Once again, I'm a big Dougie guy. I just want to make something perfectly clear. I've always defended Dougie Hamilton. Yes, he could be a bit of a bonehead defensively, but the Devils were supposed to get better when he got injured, but they didn't. They got worse.
They were missing their mojo, and
right.
It was Dougie.
And when you have Luke Hughes or Shimo Nemitz trying to anchor the power play, no offense to them, no one fears their slap shot. Dougie has one of the best and hardest slap shots in the entire league. I will die on that hill. And NHL Network still vouch for Dougie, naming him one of the top defensemen in the league.
before Dougie Hamilton reached his star level status as a offensive defenseman, for me growing up watching Shea Weber, watching Brian Rafalski, watching PK Subban, those were my three favorite offensive defensemen. Well, one of them being Rafalski as a Devil, and then watching Subban and Weber playing for Montreal and Nashville. I mean, when they were healthy, they were blowing bombs. And this is also, and then you add in my other favorite, Zdeno Chara, the Czech legend, the GOAT. Big bomb, big man, big heart.
I just want to bring this up. Remember when you said that Nikita Hotuk had potential to become the next Big Z?
He did have potential, but you know what? It was all in his head. And I mentioned on the last podcast, it's easy to see potential and talent, but it's hard to scout what's inside the brain of a player. That's the hardest thing to scout.
He's not in the league, is he?
He's back in the KHL. He wanted to return to Russia after every year, apparently from that last report from Pucks and Pitchforks.
Wow. Talk about Hotuk was like one of my favorite up-and-comers to watch, actually. He had potential. He was aggressive.
Physical. He reminded me of Volchenkov when I saw him hit very hard, but it puzzles me why he thought that way and why the Devils drafted him in the first place. I mean, not to get caught up with that, but the Devils are in a much better place with Silayev as their left-handed defenseman of the future, but definitely he's gotten much better upside. As long as he stays mentally sharp and he has a good head on his shoulder, which I know he does, the Devils can have a problem long-term.
Now let's talk about some established players on the Devils roster set to make their preseason debuts. Jack Hughes, Timo Meier, Dawson Mercer, and you know what? I'll throw in Kevin Labanc. I know the chances of him making the team, at least in my humble opinion, are slim to none. I still respect what Labanc did a couple years ago.
Put him in Utica.
He might have to. He might have no choice because Fitzy was honest with them saying, like, look, can you deal with worst case scenario? That's the reality of it because the Devils just need some extra bodies to finish out the preseason. Because like I've been saying, they're going to be going to Prague soon. And you need to play those preseason games. You can't forfeit them. And here's Kevin Labanc. And people are reminiscent over his 2019 postseason run with the Sharks, in which he led the charge in Game 7 against the Vegas Golden Knights. And he had 4 points on a single power play. It was a 5-minute major, and he stepped up to the task. And the Sharks ended up winning an OT. Man, the Sharks were so excited to watch
against Vegas.
Yeah, I just said against the Golden Knights. Yeah. It's hard to believe that, man, that
years ago.
The Sharks were so exciting to watch years and years ago. You had people like
Logan Couture.
Yeah, you had
Pavelski. You had
Pavelski, Marlowe. Years ago. We're talking about years ago. The Sharks had some entertaining players on their
Tomas Hertl was great.
Timo Meier was great.
Yeah, he still is. Matter of fact, I was at the game when Timo Meier scored his hat trick against St. Louis.
Really? I was
there for the right hat trick.
I was present for Timo Meier's first goal as a Devil. It came against the Arizona Coyotes.
Remember that.
And I was covering it. It was at Mullet Arena. And Timo was a great guy. He was smiling ear to ear post-game. But we're getting way off track. Kevin Labanc is on the Devils roster for a time being. All right. Looking at some established players set to make their preseason debuts, who are you the most excited for? And you don't have to say the most popular answer.
Yeah, I'm really liking Kevin Labanc. I mean, he could be one of those comeback player of that year type situation, and work towards reestablishing himself. physical player, doesn't hit the most, but he hits more than he does block shots. But I can see him fitting well in Sheldon Keefe's third, second line situation, giving a couple guys a night off here and there. And he can be really aggressive against teams like the Flyers or the Rangers or the Islanders when the points really do matter. And he's the kind of guy that can be very assertive. And also when the Devils go out west, I can see him being inserted into the lineup. And they end up having him against the Central too. Because you think about teams like Winnipeg, might be sloping downward, or playing against teams like Colorado, still very good, but might have a little bit of injury bugs. So you might want to use those players to rest some of your other guys when, let's say, guys like Bastion are banged up or Hala needs a break. You put him in and see what he can do. And if he does play really well and he gets to play on a line with Timo Meier again, I think there can be really good chemistry on the bench and on the ice.
Timo is actually excited for Labanc to get his chance with the Devils because Timo and Labanc were teammates in San Jose, like you alluded to. And fun fact for you, Timo and Erik Karlsson were set to get big deals, which is why Labanc at one point had to settle for a 1-year, $1 million extension despite coming off a great showing. And that kind of came back to bite him a little bit, but he ended up getting paid by the Sharks despite having another lackadaisical season, but his confidence went way down. And I'm glad to see that there's no harsh feelings between him and Timo Meier. And like I said, the Sharks, they were just focused on Erik Karlsson. They were focused on Timo Meier, which is why they had to part ways with Joe Pavelski, and that cleared the way for Pavelski to sign with the Stars. I must say, I don't think I've ever said this on the show. The reason I know so much about the Sharks is because I kind of like them just because of their uniforms. I love their blue sweaters. Blue is one of my favorite colors.
Teal blue.
Yeah, teal blue. Like I love light blue. It's like one of my favorite colors. Like I love UNC's powdered blue. I love the Philadelphia Phillies powder blue. Light blue is just like one of my favorite colors. Fun fact for my audience.
Yeah, well, me, like, my favorite team out west before Seattle came was the Winnipeg Jets, and that's because when they used to be the Atlanta Thrashers, I would follow them there, and I always like Ilya Kovalchuk, Johan Hedberg, Vyacheslav Kozlov, and Martin Havlat. I like those guys, and they did wear a teal blue, and it just felt weird to see them to go to Canada, but at the same time, I was happy for them to go to Winnipeg, but I do know there are rumors of them possibly relocating from Winnipeg, but I hope it's not true because Winnipeg is such a passionate market and they're really fueled by their fans. I'm just not a fan of Connor Hellebuck, and I'm glad the Devils did not get him because I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day about
you're going to catch so much slack for this, so you better have a good explanation.
So one of the things is Hellebuck is a really great regular season guy, but when it comes to the postseason, he's like Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. He just can't perform when the game really matters in the postseason. He just falls flat, and the Jets just fall down to the ice in Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg needs to develop a better goalie who can actually perform well in the playoffs. It's not their offense, their defense and their goaltending in the playoffs has been burdensome. And this is what, the Devils realized after the 2022 playoffs is that their goaltending with Schmid was good enough to get them to the second round, but the defense and the goaltending just wasn't there. But the Devils were able to get past the first round, even after being absent from the playoffs after a certain amount of years.
See, but Connor Hellebuck is the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, and I think you have to look at the defense in front of him as well. I think that's also a big issue because when you're playing in the playoffs, it's a way different animal because
Exactly.
it's a series and there's a lot of film and players can gauge on your weaknesses and things like that. I was actually talking to Chico about this. One of the reasons why the Devils failed against a Hurricane, one of the reasons why the Devils failed against the Hurricanes was because they were so open, they were so exposed. You're in front of the defense because the Devils were trying to pass the puck around and look for that opening, but they couldn't. Once the Hurricanes negated the Devils in neutral ice to neutralize their speed, the Devils were screwed.
Right. And with Calgary, it was different where when they were in the playoffs with Markstrom, they were able to play a more tighter game. They had guys a few seasons back with Johnny Gaudreau. They had guys with Matthew Tkachuk, and they were able to play the nitty-gritty game, play a much, much tighter game. And, you had guys like Markstrom stealing saves left and right and trying to get Calgary further through the second round, if not the third round. And even after, the Tkachuk and Huberdeau trades, Calgary still try to keep it together. But the past couple of seasons, they've been regressing backwards. They've been working towards a bit more, but now progressing far much better when their opposing rivals in the Ottawa Senators are. So in my honest opinion, the Flames have a much better future than the Senators when it comes to the draft and players that they have on their team. But anyways, the Devils are much better positioned with their goaltending. That was a problem last year. Defense, they were getting a little too young, but they had to with a couple of guys that they had to move on from. They had to move on with adding Luke, and they had Marino around, and they had a couple other guys.
You moved on from Graves and Severson because
Graves and Severson left.
And I hear it's not going well in Pittsburgh for Graves.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Graves gets bought out and, the Devils pick him up or whatever, but I don't think it would be a wise idea to do so.
Nah, it's not going to happen.
There's too much goodness going on in New Jersey, and the chemistry is pretty much set, but there's a lot much more improvement with this roster and this farm system where I'm going to say this as someone who's a prospect guy. Not many prospects are going to make it this season on the roster. And if so, it's because they're going to rest someone or someone's injured.
Yep, that's true.
So I'm going on the record saying that, but I'm letting it be because I rather see guys like Dawson Mercer graduate into veteran status.
I hope so too, because Fitzy has said that Mercer is a part of the long-term plan for New Jersey. All right, Jersey Joe, Devils take on the Canadiens later tonight. Any closing thoughts?
I would say I would like to see Jake Allen make a nice period of goaltending. Also, Isaac Poulter, I would like to see a little bit more out of him. I saw him screening Jake Allen from a tweet from a practice on a video. So that shows me that Sheldon keeps thinking ahead, getting ready for the next couple of games in the upcoming season. I do expect the Devils to be a little bit more synchronized than they were in the first preseason game against the Islanders. And then hopefully they get more of their legs going under their feet a little bit more. So that way they can go guns a-blazing and play physical once again.
And I think we're all looking forward to the upcoming season, and hopefully the Devils can make it back to the playoffs. But let's focus on preseason. Let's focus on Prague. Let's focus on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and so on.
And don't forget to have a nice Czech beer right now. I would be so good if I was in Prague right now.
I'm not much of a beer guy, more of a wine type of person. And
not in Prague. Nope. Not,
Yeah,
not in Czechia.
I'm perfectly aware. I'm perfectly aware. Like if you go to a country like Germany, they take their beer seriously. Like,
and I've been to Slovakia. They share a lot of the similar beers.
it's funny. It's
with-
funny you mentioned that
with
because Shimo Nemitz spoke to Mike Moriel of NHL.com, and Mike jokingly asked, like, Shimo, hey, what are we doing when we get to Prague? And Shimo was like, let's have a beer because they take their beer. I'm paraphrasing the tweet, but I remember seeing it. But they take their beer seriously in Europe.
Yes, they do.
Me personally, I'm more of a wine, margarita, cocktail type of person, but that's just my personal alcohol preference. I don't think I can go into any more detail than that because I don't know how the
network will like it.
Yeah, I don't know if the network will like it. But anyway, Jersey Joe, thank you for taking the time once again to talk all things Devils. I know I'm going to have you back on this show within the next few weeks. It's bound to happen. I think my audience already knows where to find you, but do you have any plugs anyway?
I mean, you can still find me on Pucks and Pitchforks. Also, you see my Twitter handle right there. I mean, I still call it Twitter. I'm too old to call it X. I still refuse to call it X. But anyways, I'm on Instagram at _Joe of Jersey, JERSEY. You're obviously going to see me on here a whole lot this season, but now that the NHL draft season's kicked off, I'm going to be doing some more prospect development, videos. So I'm just going to do my own scouting, but also keep track of the current Devil situation, plus more to come. I mean, I want to see how things pan out the first 10 games and go from there. I mean, it's going to be like a report card.
And we're excited for it. And similar to what I've said in prior episodes, changing up my show a little bit, I expect to have more guest stars in the future. But as for today's episode, hope you guys enjoy tonight's matchup between the Devils and Canadiens. I would say something in French, but I don't speak French. But
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
I hope whatever you said, it was
Thank you very much, my friends. Have a great time. Allez, le nouveau Jersey Devil. Let's go, New Jersey Devils.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
All right. Like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again. Let's hope the Devils can be la victoire.
Numéro 1.